Hi everybody, it's Adrian Blass here,
Yes, and Bridget. Hello.
and welcome to number 168 in Sounding the Shallows.
Yeah, and of course there's some good news about 168 from our wonderful statistician. It is something special apparently. Now listen to this, right? Every day has 24 hours. The week has 7 days. Ergo, the week has, guess what? 168 hours. And apparently that means you can listen to a different episode of Sounding the Shallows every hour of the week.
And if you do that, I think you ought to go somewhere where you can sit quietly, think about your life. Anyway,
Get
so
out more, maybe.
the other, that was quite a good response to when we were talking last week about people who support other people. And
Yes.
one person was saying, all the time you were talking about football and positions in football, it reminded me
Oh
of
yeah,
the
because
church.
we were we were talking about how the people in defence not only have to stop the ball from going into the opposite goal, but also have to try and get the ball up
That's
to
right, yeah.
the shooters, and they become the stars of any match. The people
Yeah.
who get the goals. So that's what we were talking about, wasn't it?
So you said it did remind me of the church. People have their own defined roles, and sometimes there is snobbery about who does what. But as you say, there are the I just do people who don't think their own role is important, but we can't do without them. Some give lots of money, some clean the church, some prophesy, some preach, some are deacons or elders, or some encourage others, all sorts of things. Some are in the limelight, some in the broom cupboard, and
Yes.
yet
And some,
they
she
may
says,
in their separately there might not be much, but together, yes, the sum is greater than the
yeah,
parts.
and she says some clean the toilets.
Some clean. So she does actually. I happen to know.
But interestingly enough, Adrian, I was thinking of a couple of verses that have always meant a lot to me. Well, I say always, not always, but for a long time. And it's in Timothy, and it's about, in my Father's house there are many dishes. Some of them are made of gold, and some of them are made of wood. Some of them are important, and some are not. And I remember the first time I looked at that, and I thought, we will almost all of us think we're made of wood. The shiny ones, the gold ones, are the ones who are leading, the ones who are preaching, the ones who are singing, the ones who are up front, the ones who prophesy, the ones who appear to have a glamorous role, like the people who score the goal.
Yeah.
And he goes on I haven't got it in front of me because I've only just thought of it, but I mean, he goes on to say, those that do the Father's will, those are the gold ones.
Well, actually, in a bit, we'll come on to something that has a little bit to do with that. One little email we had was somebody who said about our conversations last Friday. She said, I like the conversation about Jesus tying shoelaces, because we were talking about Jesus, like you did often, being at the back of the line of kids going for a walk, tying up the shoelaces on the fat one who didn't want to go anyway. And she says, I'm a street pastor and we give out flip-flops, and we usually have to help the person put them on, and I liken it to Jesus washing feet. And this is really close to that, isn't it?
I think it is.
Being there to help somebody when they're
and
not
what she
able
do-
to even put a flip-flop
Well, what
on.
she doesn't say is they're people on the whole who've
Yes,
drunk
I
too
know,
much, or
I
people
know.
who've been really silly, people who have forgotten where they live, people who, and yes, helping them put them on. That is really lovely.
It's great. Yeah.
I was thinking as well, a lot of the things that are happening, and obviously there was the World Cup final. Lionesses didn't quite make it, but it was huge, high drama. And we were talking, weren't we, about how often our role is, as we call them, supporters of football teams, supporters of, other things, supporters of the church. And I was thinking of what Jesus said, that what he has wanted for us is that we rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. And I thought that is giving your heart support to things, isn't it, in the news? They're often not things that we're involved with, but they're things you can allow your heart to join in and mourn with those who mourn and rejoice
I think
with
Paul
those who
said
rejoice.
it more specifically than Jesus, in fact. And
Well, it probably was Paul.
we've been thinking about Paul and being a sort of wild card, and that's part of that, isn't it? That if you're with someone who's mourning, you don't try to get them better by rejoicing wildly in the hope that they'll become like you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. But lots of drama this week.
Well,
obviously.
we mentioned the lionesses, haven't we?
We have indeed. That was amazing. We didn't see it live, did we? Because we did go to church in the end, but we
right.
came back and it was recorded, and we did watch it. Shame they lost, but there we are.
Yeah.
And you took somebody to see the Angel of the North.
Well, I
didn't
was
you?
thinking, that awe and amazement, and it's not to do with support, it's to do with, you mentioned high drama, it's to do with something extraordinary. And if you've never been to the Angel of the North, it is an extraordinary thing. Anthony Gormley's statue, it's incredibly high and incredibly strong and made of metal and intended to represent the North. And I think represent the reincarnation of the North after all the loss of the steel and the shipbuilding and everything.
And it stands looking over the valley towards the north, doesn't it?
It does.
As though guarding it.
It
And
does.
when you actually walk right up to it, it's phenomenal.
It is phenomenal, and it is a phenomenal creation by man. That's what I found myself thinking, because we went there in the morning, and then in the afternoon we went to something else that has been created by man, represents so much more. And this is where I think you pronounce it Gaia.
I don't actually know. We ought to know.
I should have checked.
Gaia, it's spelled.
It's the earth. It's the world. It's the world hanging, this huge orb. If you haven't heard about it, it's worth just Googling it. It's the most extraordinary thing. And it hangs at the moment in Durham Cathedral, doesn't it?
It's not easy to explain if you're not there. The nave of Durham Cathedral is probably one of the most beautiful buildings, let alone cathedrals, in the world. And as you walk into Durham Cathedral at the moment, you will see the earth, a huge model sculpture, I don't quite know what to call
I
it,
think it's a hot air
of the
balloon.
earth. I don't know. Anyway, it's hanging in the nave, and it's massive. And if you want, you can walk right up to the front of the cathedral and watch it from a slightly greater distance. And wherever you go at the moment in the cathedral, there is an angle.
There is.
And you see the blue and the white and the grey of the oceans and countries marked on this planet of ours.
Yeah. And I think what I thought was, yes, this is an extraordinary thing and created by man, as is the Angel of the North. But I thought there are real angels. And also, when I looked at it, Adrian, I don't know what your feeling was, but I just thought, how can this planet be without the most extraordinary creator mind? Is that what you thought?
Well, I didn't on that occasion, although I may well have done another time. But I went right up to the other end and looked at the planet I live on, floating there, and I thought about the whole tension and business of when people say, and I've said it, where is God in the world, when the trouble is there and when the bad things happen. And I was actually praying up in the I can't remember what you call it. I had to go right round because I was in my electric powered chair to come back again to be able to see this model. And kind of, it sounds ridiculous, but sort of cheering God on over the business of having this place, this planet, which I think, and anyone, other people think what they like, I think he is very fond of. And I don't know how I thought about that, but we brought some pictures back that I'm glad we took.
There is so much water. There is so much water. And as I was looking at it, at first I thought of the water covering the earth, and then I thought, and you just see these bits, don't you, like Australia, and then there's Africa, and then there's South America. Because we were looking up at it, we saw mainly the southern hemisphere, really. But the amount of ocean. And, we hear these matter-of-fact details, don't we, about how the water is warming by 1%. And as I looked at it, and I saw how fragile the land masses are compared with the amount of water and ocean and ice. It really reaffirmed everything about the need for us to face climate change, but the beauty of our planet is...
I would happily go back to the cathedral again this week or next week just to have one more look at that.
Yeah.
And the dramatic thing for me is that now that my mobility is not good and I have to use this electric powered chair, we can actually go up and get parking outside the cathedral.
Is that a wonder of the world? It feels like it to
yes,
us
it
at
is
the
to
moment.
me. It's an amazing thing
Yeah.
that I can drive right into the cathedral, and they've got their act together so that now you can go right around the back of the cathedral and around the cloisters, which always sounds like a Dutch tennis player to me.
Does it
around
really,
the
darling?
cloisters and then into the refectory. And I love it. I'm really, really grateful for it.
Yeah.
But
I mean, the great thing about this Gaia is that it's not just in Durham, is it? It's in all sorts of places.
No, it's travelling abroad as well to Sweden.
Travelling
I think,
abroad, it is, yeah.
And more recently, this incredible cable car rescue in
Yes.
Pakistan.
It really has been a high drama week, both for
It
us
has,
at home
yeah.
and looking at these things, and then you look on television and you see this extraordinary rescue.
Several people rescued from this cable car that...
Well, all of them were rescued.
Yes, well, I mean, there were several of them in it.
Yeah.
Children on their way to school, most of them. And it reminded me of a couple of things. One was a woman we met who was from Pakistan. I think we met her in Italy, but I may be wrong.
We met her in the queue in Florence,
Right,
Adrian,
now
and
it
because
was
you're
then,
in queues for a long time, we
That's
had a
right.
very long chat.
And
with
she
her.
was talking about the way in which people regard Pakistan. And she was saying that she always finds it sad and unfortunate that people talk negatively about Pakistan because we hear all sorts about difficulties in Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
And she said it's one of the most beautiful countries in the world. And actually the people there are wonderful people. She wasn't saying there weren't any problems,
No.
but she was simply saying, I wish people would look a little more closely at the place I call home. But this was fascinating from that point of view. It's interesting. From the crowd below, there was this loud shout of, not in English, but God is great from the crowd, over and over again. And it reminded me of G.K. Chesterton writing about what he described as an abyss of gratitude to God, which is situated just behind us. And if we take a step back, we fall into it, and we are immersed with the requirement for gratitude for those things that are good and wonderful. It's not quite as simple as that, obviously, but it was a reminder, seeing people working so hard and
so brave.
eventually rescuing these people, of the goodness in people when disaster strikes. It happens to all of us, and we can suddenly be our best. It's fantastic. And I so admire the people who were there making that possible. It was really wonderful.
Extraordinary. So, but the other high drama of this week, of course, is like the opposite to that.
By
isn't
contrast,
it? Total contrast, really. And I think wherever you are in the world, if you're listening to us, you will have heard about the nurse. I mean, we don't really need to talk about it too much, except that it really has entered into so deeply into so many people, not just the parents of these poor wee babies, but us as a country, the NHS, our beloved NHS, and right deep into us, maybe.
We've just come through COVID where, in England anyway, people would go out and applaud on the street the NHS and the nurses and the doctors.
And so they should.
And so they should. But I think there is a part of human beings that looks at something like this unimaginable crime of killing premature and very tiny babies that makes us ask a question right down deep in ourselves. Is this really one of us? Now, I know it's a corrupted one of us, but is it really possible that something so grotesque can happen? I mean, it's such a grinding of gears inside you, doctors, nurses, people who make you better. It's someone's daughter who did it. And I was thinking it was like some kind of hideously distorted hall of mirrors, maybe for that person, I don't know, where you you look into each reflection of yourself and you believe that, and then you move to another one and you believe that, and you get into that habit of believing reflections of yourself and end up in total darkness, which is what seems to happen. But I have no knowledge if that's how it was.
Do you think most people do look deep into themselves? I mean, I don't know. I think my first reaction was I wanted it far away from me. I didn't want to even...
But that is looking deeply into yourself,
well,
isn't
I was
it?
just going to say, even I have tried to find the nearest thing I can, and I didn't do very well. But there have been times in my life where I suppose I have become obsessional about something to a point of almost self-harming at one point in my teenage life. And I can only assume that it became more and more of an obsession. How could she deceive people? How could she get away with these things? That it became such a distortion that her humanity was somehow obliterated. And I think we need to pray. This girl, this young woman, is going to be in prison for the rest of her life, and I think we need to pray that something extraordinary happens. Forgiveness, healing, awareness, and moving through all of it to a place of peace. Because Jesus died for all our sins on that cross. There was no one that was so big that he didn't die for it. That's what we believe.
I don't think anyone has any spare sympathy for that at the moment, but
No,
I agree with you, and we default to thinking about everybody involved in something. We always have done. Can't help it.
Well, actually, one of our sons, who's just gone back to work abroad, said, "You know what, I do feel sorry for her, because at some point she is going to become fully aware of what she's done, and she has to live with that." So that's why I think we do need to think about it, really.
No,
so just think of some
do.
positive
Can
things.
I just say that I
sorry.
do think people do look deep into themselves, but that's why they run away from it. That's why we say, I don't want to think about it, because of the challenge of saying that's a human being there who did that. But anyway, yeah. No, a good thing. There are some good things this week, weren't there?
And especially if you love watching athletics. And again, neither of us have ever really been, well, maybe you when you were very young, but the athletics being on, and you do see such glorious things, don't you? What's been your favourite thing?
Well, two things. One is the pole vault, which during this week, Katie Moon from America and Nina Kennedy, who is from Australia, reached the same height in the pole vault, and decided in the end, because they failed, both failed the next one, that they would share the gold.
Yeah.
And there was something
so unusual and so lovely,
incredible about their smiles and their tears.
Yes.
And their realisation that they'd both got a gold medal.
I know.
Which was truly
and
wonderful.
they were almost jumping around like kids.
Lovely,
it was lovely.
yeah.
But the other one, and this is very much a UK thing, really, but Katarina Johnson-Thompson got the gold in the heptathlon. Why is that such a joy? I think even watching her on the podium, fiddling around with her hair, looking self-conscious, looking almost wriggling with, and then at last feeling proud of what she's done.
She's an unusual athlete, perhaps an unusual person to be a successful athlete, because you get the feeling it's taken her a long time to truly believe in herself.
She did talk, didn't she?
People have used that phrase, imposter syndrome.
And that did apply to her. She could never really believe she had the right to be there.
Can the person who can the person I am who did that really be me?
Yes.
I think we could all identify with that to at least some extent.
There is something, isn't there? I mean, we're back to how we were talking about the football, the depth of a feeling of failure when your legs just didn't do it for you, the joy of doing it. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing, and I love athletics because you know that they know. It's such a fine line between success and failure. And the way they are with each other, almost always at the end of a race, They're genuinely hugging each other, genuinely helping each other up as they lie
It does seem
gasping
good.
on the
I mean,
ground.
I think someone will now write and tell us actually they're not always like that, but
Well, of course they're not always.
but there does seem to be, because the margins are so small. I think that probably makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this imposter syndrome thing. And we seem to always talk about Zacchaeus, but
Only the last 3
Zacchaeus,
weeks.
the little man in the tree. Now, there's someone who might have suffered from this. He might have said to himself, can this person who gives money away and repays all those he's cheated and gets chosen by Jesus to be his host, can this other person really, really be me? Am I an imposter? How do I deserve it? Well, the central and most significant point is that unlike the athletes who work like mad, he didn't deserve it.
No, any more than the thief on the cross.
No, and that's the right in the heart of the strange mystery of the Christian faith, and it is strange. We talk about it as though we understand it. And that line in George Herbert's poem that I love so much, where the fellow says to God, or love, which is God, says, "Just send me where I belong, where my shame should be."
It's the poem that begins, "Love bade me welcome,"
Bade me
isn't
welcome. And love says, not the exact words, but in a way it's good to say them a little more accessibly. It says, "Did you not know that I bore the blame?" And there's something strange and really deep about that. And since before COVID, as anyone who's heard me blethering on will know, I feel as though I've had a shock in slow motion about understanding that there's a principle within that is crucial. I was remembering the Archimedes thing with the bath, where he jumps out of the bath and says, "Eureka!" because I worked out the thing about displacement. You get in the water and that amount, all that stuff. And in the 60s or 70s or something, there was a famous Christian, Chinese Christian, I think. I should have got his name, I can't remember it.
Somebody will tell us.
Eventually leapt around excitedly, shouting, "I'm dead, I'm dead,"
What?
up and down. Well, I'll tell you why in a minute. And the people in the church said, "Why are you shouting, I'm dead?" And he said, "Because I've suddenly understood. I'm forgiven.
Ah,
I've suddenly realized what I'm trying to talk about just now. Did you not understand that it's really happened? It's okay. It's okay. Whatever you've done, it can be redeemed. It can be cleaned up." And I wouldn't want to go into the theology of it at the moment at all. But that slow motion shock is really feeding my understanding at the moment.
I mean, when you think about the rescue in Pakistan, and then you think about the situation with this nurse, with the parents of these babies, some of whom are still in a most appalling state and haven't managed to move through it. And you think about all those things, the greatest rescue on the cross. And so we can, I think, and should pray for her, that she gets to a point where she can say, at some point in her life, "I'm forgiven." Well, it's a tough one, because there's a little bit of us that don't quite want that, and I'm sure, if we're representing the parents. But that's what we need to be thinking about, isn't it?
Yeah, thinking about the parents, people they love, people who love them. I mean,
forgiveness
it's
is
a
the
huge
greatest
thing.
wonder of the world, isn't it? Really.
I think it is. I think the possibility of redemption, of cleaning up,
Yeah.
is
Even greater than the angel of the
amazing.
north.
Yeah.
We'd
So,
love to
there we
hear
are.
from you, and we'll talk to you again next week. Goodbye.
Yeah.